Although it was not intentional, Britain was responsible for creating the organization that played the greatest role in reshaping Nigeria after its independence. A seemingly innocuous naval accident in the 19th century set off a chain of events that eventually led to the creation of the modern day Nigerian Army and Police Force. In 1858, annexation of Lagos in August 1861, Glover was promoted to captain on 24th November 1862 and was appointed administrator of Lagos on 21st April 1863. Since British influence was strongest in the coastal areas, its extension to inland areas was dependent on the presence and demonstration of physical and military force. When Glover was appointed, the only security force in Lagos was the 100 soldiers of the West Indian Regiment. Of these, only 36 on active duty, as the remainder were either sick or on guard duty. On 9th October 1862, the governor of Lagos, Sir Stanhope Freeman, wrote to the Duke of Newcastle, then the British Secretary of State for the Colonies, to argue for the establishment of a security force in Lagos. Freeman made it clear exactly which people should be recruited for the new force. The expense of this establishment is about 1/5 of what a similar number of regular troops would cost the imperial government, and the Hausa force is more efficient than the West Indian Regiment. 1/5 of the men are usually on sick lists in this place, while there's rarely more than 1% of the Hausa men ill. Beside this, they require no commissariat, little or no transport, and nourish themselves on the product of the country, which are always to be had. Wearing no shoes, they do not get footsore on long marches, and the simplicity of their dress renders it both convenient and economical. In June 1863, the Colonial Office granted Glover permission to train and deploy 30 of his Hausa companions as a security force for Lagos. They were known as Glover's Hausas, as well as the 40 Thieves, for unknown reasons, and later were renamed the Hausa Militia. Their remit was enlarged to encompass internal security and military matters, and by December 1863, they had grown to 600 members. They were used to mount punitive expedition and to protect British trade routes around Lagos. They were also deployed in military operations against the Egba Yorubas in 1870, and 100 members were sent to Kumasi in the Gold Coast, which later became Ghana, to fight against the Ashanti between 1873 and 1874. When the Ashanti conflict ended, half of Glover's Hausas remained in the Gold Coast, and the other half were sent back to Lagos and renamed the Hausa Constabulary in 1886. The unit that remained behind formed the foundation of what later became the modern-day Ghanaian Army. The Hausa Constabulary was later renamed the Lagos Constabulary and operated as the police force for the Lagos colony. An independent Hausa force was carved out of the constabulary and given exclusively military functions. British stereotyping of Hausas as the martial race led to a deliberately radicalized military recruitment policy that would have long-term consequences for Nigeria's military and political stability over the next 150 years. Glover recruited Hausas as fighting troops, while other ethnic groups, many of whom were from areas near the southern coastline and whom the British regarded as less warlike, were used to perform menial duties as porters and interpreters. The diaries, memoirs, and recollection of British military and colonial officers are replete with a fascination and admiration for the Hausas as a warrior or martial race. A British army officer boasted that Hausas formed the best fighting material in Africa. They are short, sturdy-looking men and excellent marchers. While another Briton spoke of their force of character combined with the physical strength which is, I believe, unsurpassed by any people in the world, that makes the Hausa the efficient soldier he is. A British admiral said, "They make admirable soldiers, being of great physical strength and are cool and brave in action." These impressions were reinforced by the history of success in warfare that Muslim states acquired in West Africa. The British regarded Hausa as natural warriors whose religion imposed discipline on them and who were members of a culture accustomed to battle and victory. Apart from the racialized perception of the Hausas and other ethnic groups, there were practical reasons why the British chose them as a martial race. The British habit of identifying martial races was not unique to West Africa. In its other colonies, Britain had similarly identified races that is considered to be imbued with martial credentials, recruited them into the colonial armies, then used them to conquer other ethnic groups far away from their homeland. The Sikhs were the preferred martial race in India, and the Gurkhas were their counterparts in Nepal. Hausas were chosen in West Africa because the majority of British military campaigns at the outset of the area were against non-Hausa and non-Islamic ethnic groups with whom the Hausas had no allegiance. For example, many Hausa soldiers who were formerly slaves in Yoruba land were deployed in military campaigns in that area and were unlikely to show restraint when given the opportunity to wield weapons against the communities in which they had been enslaved. Owing to West Africa's massive linguistic diversity, British military authorities imposed Hausa as the army's language of command and communication. British soldiers took course and exams in Hausa. Hausas were also itinerant traders who traveled and traded throughout West and North Africa. The geographical knowledge they acquired from trading journeys and their long habit of trekking great distances barefoot without complaining made them desirable of army recruits. 30th September 1885, Glover died at the age of 56 in Harley Street, London. He was buried in Kensal Green. A monument to him, a life-size marble bust, was erected in St. Paul's Cathedral and was placed in the crypt next to that of Lord Nelson. The legacy of the militia he formed survived long after him.